Right.
Go.
Let me get to the. Yeah. Okay. There we are. Keep it on gallery view so I can see what's happening. Ladies and gentlemen, and assembled company, welcome to Monday night at the World Storytelling Cafe. Well, it might not be night where you are, it might be midday, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, or sometime. I have no idea whatsoever. But what I do know is that Monday night is connecting the world by story. And tonight we have an array of tellers from across both sides of the Atlantic. And and we're doing 5 minute stories. So I'm going to cross. Before I go all the way across the Atlantic, I'm going to cross the Irish Sea, and I'm probably in the middle of nowhere. Did you say you were on a little? You were on a little island somewhere?
The next parish is America, John. So I'm on the Aran Islands. I'm on the
Oh,
smallest of the
beautiful!
Aran Islands
So we can all be
today.
jealous of all. But for the moment, can we put our hands together for Orla McGovern?
Yay!
Yay! Thanks, everyone. I'm over in Inisheer on the smallest of the Aran Islands, and about 100 yards down the road from me here is a holy well, Tubber Aina. But this is not a holy story, so bear with me. Many, many years ago, there lived an old man called Michael, and he was big of heart but poor of pocket. And he was a widower, God love him. And he had 3 sons that he loved very much. But he toiled and he worked and he prayed and he toiled and he worked and he prayed. And much as he did that, he never had enough money to give them the lives that they wanted. So, in desperation one day, as happens to people, as we all know, didn't he turn to the devil himself to ask for help? Devil, says he, I will give you my earthly soul if you give me a bag of gold enough to provide for my 3 lovely sons. Oh, sure, I will, of course, said the devil. That sounds like a great bargain. In fact, I'm feeling so generous today. I'll give you 7 years of education for your sons. Send them off now, and here's your bag of gold. Well, Michael sent off his 3 sons. The first one he sent off to a life of religion. The second one he sent off to a life of science. And the third one he sent off to a life of law. The 7 years went by quickly, and the 3 sons were very successful in their professions, but they knew that the devil would soon be back to their father to ask for his earthly soul. And that might be him chirping above me now. The first son, the eldest, was the one to come back first, and he sat with his father. And midnight struck. There were 3 knocks on the door, and they opened the door, and there stood the devil. Oh, please, please, begged the eldest son. I'm a priest. Would you give me a week with my father before you take his soul to hell? I want to give him as much spiritual counsel as I can. Ah, go on, sure, said the devil. I've a few more souls to be getting on my rounds. I'll come back to you in a week, but make sure that soul is ready, mind. And a week passed, and sure enough, at midnight, 3 knocks came knocking on the door. And this time, the middle son had returned home to be with his father, the doctor. Oh, please, said the young doctor, please, would you just give me... I will not give you a week, said the devil. There's no way I'm giving you a week. No, a deal is a deal. Would you give me... Would you give me a day with my father? He said, let me heal his sore hands. Let me balm his feet. Just give me time to spend with him before you take his soul off to hell. Ah, go on, said the devil. I'm feeling good. I'm feeling in a good mood. I'll come back to you in 24 hours and have that soul ready. And sure enough, 24 hours later, or one day, there was a knock at the door at midnight. And at this stage, the laziest 3rd son had ambled up and was there with his father. And the devil saw him inside, and he said, don't be asking me now for a week, or don't be asking me now for a day with your father. I'm here to collect that soul. I wouldn't dream of doing that, said the youngest son, the lawyer. Come in, he said. I was just going to offer you a little drop of whiskey for the road before you go. You're trying to buy time, aren't you? Said the devil. Well, maybe a little bit of time. I tell you what, said the youngest son. How about we drink whiskey until that candle on the table there has burnt out to nothing? Well, the devil looked over at the candle on the table, and sure, it was no bigger than my thumb, a little nubbin of a candle. You'd better pour that whiskey fast, said the devil, or I'll have that soul. Is it a bond? Said the lawyer. It's a bond, said the devil. Pour the whiskey. So they poured the 3 glasses of whiskey. They raised their glasses, and the son went over and blew out the candle and put it in his pocket. Now, devil, says he, that candle will never burn down to nothing, and you'll never get my father's soul. Be gone with you. The devil let out the biggest roar you ever held, and he grabbed that bottle of whiskey from the table and he took off out the window. Don't worry, father, said the youngest son. I've another bottle in my bag now, so we can celebrate. That's my story.
That's a good story.
Lovely.
Well, I think I'd have chased the devil out for the whiskey.
If it was the only bottle, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, that was fantastic. If you disappear, we won't be offended. We'll just know that your internet has just a seagull has taken your internet or something.
Or a cow. Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Yeah, you can see where I am.
Well, we're coming back. We're going to drive. We're going to drive back across and get a boat get a boat from Dublin to Holyhead, and then we'll just poodle down to Somerset or somewhere, and there's someone waiting down there, Irene Lofthouse. Put your hands together for Irene.
Yay!
Hello, I'm actually in Bradford, up in the Yorkshire Dales.
Oh, of course, yeah, sorry, brain dead.
That's all right, don't worry about it. I mean, I can go down there if you want. I don't mind. Make my way down there, but this is not a story of down there. This is a story of up here. This is Fonton in Bradford, and this is a story about Fair Becker, which is one of our legends, because there's lots and lots of legends, strange tales in Bradford Dale. And this is about Fair Becker. It's set many, many, many moons ago, before there was any communication and that kind of thing. So imagine lots and lots of fields around. And Becker, she's a farmer's daughter, but she's renowned for her beauty. And one day, as she's working in the fields, she sees a young man on a horse come riding past. And as you do in those situations when there's not much else around to entertain you, she stopped and she looked, she said hello, and the young man on the horse said hello too. And so they started talking, and they took a fancy to each other. He because of her beauty, and she because of his laughing eyes, and also because of his rich attire and the horse. And as people did in those days, they started to go out together, to walk round the fields, to talk, to chat. And they did it in secret because Becca knew that her father wouldn't approve. She shouldn't have her head turned by a rich young man. But they did this for several weeks and got closer and closer. And as young people did, they fell in love. And they walked and talked and planned. And Becca was just so happy to be in the company of this young man, who we'll call Jack, because in the legend, he doesn't actually have a name. So Jack and she walked and talked. But Jack also talked to himself, because Jack had a secret that he hadn't told Becca, he was already betrothed. Because his father had decided that Jack should marry a widow, who was a rich widow, who had lands and buildings that would make the family so much richer, because Jack had been dwindling the family resources by going and drinking in the Robin Hood. And Jack was so in love with Becca and her beauty that he didn't want to tell her. Because basically Jack, for all his charm and his laughing eyes, he was a coward. And he went nightly to the Robin Hood and dwindled the family resources even more by sitting and drinking ale and getting in fights because he didn't know how to handle the situation. So we didn't see Becca for almost a month. And Becca, of course, was absolutely frantic. This beautiful, this charming young man who she'd got plans to marry. Where was he? What had happened? Was he ill? Was he dead? She didn't know. She was frantic. And then one day, Jack, on his horse, rode swiftly into the yard and shouted at Becca and said, get their glad rags on, lass, because we're off. We're going to get married. We're off to see Vicar. And of course, Becca was absolutely, blown away. We're getting married. Brilliant. Ran into the house, got her wonderful shawl, the one that had been handed down to her from her mother, wrapped it around her and jumped on the horse as fast as she could. And off they went as Jack lashed the horse to a gallop at breakneck speed. And Becca held on for dear life on this horse. And she was so happy, she was beaming. Today's the wedding day. This is the rest of her life. She's going to be so happy with her Jack, until she saw Jack's face that was glowering and dark. And a horse that turned off the road onto a little track over the moors that were pocked with old mine workings. Jack, she said, Jack, this isn't the way to Old Allen Lane. This isn't the way to the chapel. Jack said nothing. Jack just glowered. And Jack danced his horse around the circles of the pits. Jack, what's going on? We're going to be late for the wedding. And then suddenly Jack just pulled up the horse sharp and pushed Becca as hard as he could off the horse towards one of the holes, the deep mine shafts that were disused. And Becca held on for dear life. She kicked and she scratched and she screamed, all to no avail. Jack kicked too and he punched and he danced the horse around to shake her off until she fell into one of the mine shafts. And she hit each of the sides as she tumbled down into the bottom and hid in a heap, her body bloody and broken. Jack didn't look back. He cried because she was her love, and he wanted to marry her, but he couldn't say no to his father. And off he rode. But as he rode, he heard Becca's voice on the wind, cursing him for the rest of his life, telling him he would never, ever be happy. He left her there. And some weeks later, he married the rich fiancée. And they lived together for some years, but life never went right. The family riches dwindled as Jack drank them away. His wife hated him. There were no children. Nothing grew wherever he was. And he took to going back to the Robin Hood to drink and to curse himself. But every time he went there was Becca, standing there, her body bloody, broken, cursing him, taunting him, haunting him. And Jack just got in a rage and shouted at her. Nobody else in the pub could see her, only Jack. And eventually it drove him so mad that he broke down and confessed. And the villagers went to the mine shaft and they brought back her bruised and bloody body. And they took it to the chapel and interred her in a pauper's grave, the very chapel where she and Jack were going to wed. And Jack disappeared. Never heard of him again, never seen. And yet Becca, fair Becca, she said to haunt the viaduct that now covers the fields where her farm used to be. And if any young man is walking along that viaduct in the evening and his name is called, he shouldn't answer. For if he answers that call, fair Becca may just appear and drag him off to be her husband.
Oh.
Oh.
Oh,
that was...
Well,
Strange tales in Bradford Dale. We've got many of them.
yeah. Well, I'm going to run away from Bradford. I'm going I'm going to go down that little bit of motorway till it joins the 62, and then I'm going to get down the M1 as fast as I can. I have no idea where I'm going, but Sarah Lloyd Winder's going to phone me up and say, "I'll give you sanctuary." And, oh no! All right, cheers, thank you, Sarah. So where are you, Sarah?
I am in South Mims. But I'm telling
South Mims. Yeah, you see, that's perfect. You see, I come down the M1, and I told you I was coming down the M1, and I just flip off. I flip off at I turn towards. I wouldn't even go as far as the A1 services. I'd turn off just before the big Sainsbury's and everything, because I won't mention the unmentionable that I mentioned last time you were at South Mims, just for your sensibilities. But Sarah, have you got a tale for us? Hands together for Sarah Lawwinder.
Woo! Hey. But in fact, even though I'm in South Mims, I'm going to Somerset, and I'm going to the town where my father lives, to Wincanton. A little tale there. It was a Friday. Friday was market day, and everything was busy. And the local young lord was in town. Now, he said it was to watch his father's cattle being sold, but it wasn't. It's because he had a new horse. He had spent everything on the new horse. It was amazing. And by mid-afternoon, he had drunk in every pub in Wincanton. And even now, there are a lot of pubs in Wincanton. It was one of those places that, you know, you changed your horses. It was a centre point. There were a lot of pubs. So by mid-afternoon, he had drunk a lot when he greeted a young friend. "See the horse, it's amazing," he said. "It's so fast off." Well, of course, his friend challenged him. "It can't be that fast, not really that fast. How fast do you think it is?" "Well," said the young man, "I think I can be home in 8 minutes flat on the new horse." "Oh, it's a wager!" And it was struck up, and people witnessed it, and soon everybody was muttering. And that's when his sister, who'd come into town to get some bits and pieces at the market, saw her brother and shook her head. Not again. Her young brother, well, he was the youngest of the boys, but older than her, was renowned for wasting his money. And now a wager. If he lost, he couldn't pay it, she thought. But she guessed better go and watch. Well, the market square was lined with people, you can imagine. A wager struck between the two men set off wagers between everybody, and it was market day. Everybody was there. And soon they were up on carts, ready to start. It was quiet as possible when they shouted go. But when they shouted go, the noise hit the entire area, and I'm sure the building shook. My house would have shook. 2 Mill Street. It would have wobbled. At that point, I think, the top floors weren't quite secure as they are now. Anyway, off went the young lord on his horse, straight up the house street, out of the town, up, and then he would turn left. Well, his sister, hoping to catch a glimpse and perhaps even stop him, had gone out the Bruton Road, out and round, going up towards Alfred's Tower. Well, as soon as the young man had gone, all the farm carts and the people had leapt on, and they were up the high street. It was a melee. You see, at that time, there was no horse racing, but now, of course, there is the racecourse. And they went straight past what is now that flat top of the racecourse, out over the fields, and he was going on that beautiful horse very, very fast. Up towards the woods, they could see him like a streak of dark lightning. And then a shout went up. "Black dog! Black dog!" And everybody stood and looked. Yes, there was a dog. There was a big dog following. His sister on the other side was looking over, and she heard the shouts, and she could see the shape. "That dog? We don't have a black dog." But confused. Everybody stood up and watched to see what would happen. And it wasn't good. The big black dog seemed to go underneath the legs of the horse, and the horse was going so fast it couldn't stop. There was a tumble, and the young master seemed to rise in the air and roll and roll and roll and crash. And at that point, everybody took a big intake of breath. The young lady was first. Up the side of the hill, and she looked. It wasn't a good sight. She could see her brother broken on the ground. The horse was some distance away, lame, but the black dog nowhere. And then, of course, the melee turned up, shouting, screaming, wanting to look, and she was pushed well out the way. And there was the young man who'd made the wager with him on the first cart, looking down at his friend's broken body. They lifted it on the cart. They took it home to the big house in Staunton. They laid it out, the broken, tumbled body in the hall. And the story of the black dog was repeated and repeated until it got to one of the old gardeners, who said, "That's the third. The third master. The third of the line who has been killed. Beware that black dog. It comes when you are reckless, when you are a wastrel, and it destroys everything." And that is the story of the Black Dog of Staunton, which is just about 4 or 5 miles outside Wincampton. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Must have moved down from the Norfolk coast, girl.
Oh, it's a real true story, supposedly, in the town.
There are. Yeah.
There's lots of black dogs in Somerset as well, different sorts of black dogs. Yeah.
They're everywhere. But right now, I'm leaving South Mims. I'm pootling around the M25 a bit. I'm shooting up the M11. I'm going to Stansted Airport. I'm getting on an aeroplane and I'm shooting over to Canada, right? And so there's and Frances is waiting for me at the airport because she's a good old girl. And so please, can you put your hands together for Frances Roberts Riley?
Yay!
You won't need your mucklucks. So welcome to Connecting the World by Story and the World Story Cafe, Telling Cafe. Frances Roberts Riley. I am Frances Roberts Riley. Satu Vishtu, how are you? Now, there's no better way than connecting the world through stories than to tell you a Romany Welsh gypsy tale that's traveled 1,000 years across from India to Europe, to Canada, where I am, and on to Australia, New Zealand, and America. So the telling of our stories, which we call Paradisha, was for families to hold together the Rom Rat, that's our Romany blood. We did that for telling historical events and as everyday warnings about survival. And I'm going to be telling one from Bala in North Wales, where my first cousin, 5 times removed, Matthew Wood, lived. And he heard this story from his grandmother, Black Ellen Wood. She's my second cousin, 5 times removed. Now, how do we know that these stories were around now? Well, a Victorian ethnographer named Francis Hines Groom collected and assembled 76 tales, of which 19 are from the Welsh Romany oral tradition, and they were recited to him by John Roberts, who was a wonderful storyteller, and he happens to be my 3 times great grandfather. Now, it's really important to know that these stories were not meant for books. They were meant to be heard. Our oral tradition has kept the Romanist language alive from completely dying out, and most of these stories would have had Romany words in them. However, with the best of intentions, these Victorians edited all that out, as well as the cultural context in which they were spoken. But these days, we're owning our own stories and telling our own stories. And so I will be reinstating the Romanus, and I will be giving you the cultural context. So I do this with much honor, Mari Puta, to my third cousin, Bob Lovell Kamula, who lives in New Zealand. And he's kept the Romany language alive and these stories as well. So with much honor and love, I tell you the story, Winter. A Puro Dai, an old man, and a Puri Daya, an old woman, were very poor. They lived in a cottage, and the old man had saved up his luva, his money, and stored it in his stocking for winter. Pretty soon, a knock came on the door. A beggar stood there. The old woman said to him, "Who are you?" He said, "I'm Winter." So she handed him over the stocking that had the luva, the money in it. Now the husband comes home. Okay, so what do? They get their hat and their coat, the steady target, and they leave the house. They take the door with them, and they go and find a tree and hide in it. Monkey Salo, before daybreak, the robbers arrive, and as robbers do, they're chawing, they're lying, and they're also quarreling over the spoils. One of them says, "You know, I really need to pay a change for £1. I'm going to go to a bend," that's the devil, "and ask for change." And with that, the door comes crashing down on the robbers. They think it's the bend, the devil, and they flee, leaving the stocking and the luva, the money behind. The Puri Dai, the old man and woman, they leave and they go back to their cottage. Now, what is the Romany context for all this? Well, there's 2 more words for you. Dick and Shun, watch and listen, and always trust the elders, because they know how to deal with tricksters. Sorry, okay. So Welsh Romany had a special whistle they would use just to warn others when the police were near, because the police would come and break up the Achitan, the tanks, and they would tell the Roma to move on. So out of necessity, Romany live on the margins, and we learn how to survive this reality, who to trust and who to avoid. And our Paramecia, our stories, tell us how to navigate and negotiate these dark places where nothing should be assumed. So at this time in our lives, I'd like you to pay attention, stay alert, and stay safe. So pushdibok.com, good luck and love, and thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Francis, you're a library yourself. You're marvellous. Thank you. And but I can't hang around in your house. I've got to get out on the road, polish up my thumb, and get out on the highway and hitch across to the man who's got most extensive private library I have ever come across. And we're staying in Canada, but we're going to go across to Norman Perrin. Right, put your hand together for Norman Perrin.
Thank you, John. And we have to travel a little further. First of all, up the road to 401 to the Ottawa Valley. And then we get to Black Bay Road. And that's not the end of the journey, because once we've reached Black Bay Road, we have to travel back in time. Back in time when my brothers and I were younger people. So it was winter time in Black Bay Road. It was cold. And it was the kind of cold that they like to tell stories about. And in fact, well, every word of this story is as true as the next. It was so cold the birds were stealing wool off the backs of the sheep. The cows could not drink their water sometimes because the water was frozen in the pails. When we hauled the water up from the wells by hand, the pail would have half the time frozen solid. It was a tough time, but we had times to enjoy ourselves. And one of the enjoyments was ice fishing. My brothers and I would go to the lake back of our place, about 1.5 miles, and the deal was 2 of us would go. One would carry the axe and the fishing gear. The other one would chop the hole when we got there. And so there was my brother Robert and I going down the road on our snowshoes down to Mud Lake. And then I carried the gear, and Robert, as the deal went, was to chop the hole. Now, chopping is hard work, and I saw him going down, swinging that axe, and the chips of ice were flying through the air, shining like diamonds in the clear blue sky. And I thought to myself, if those were real diamonds, we'd be a wealthy man. Well, it was thick ice. It had been a cold, cold winter. And I was sipping the Ottawa Valley black tea that kept the chill off. It was a special kind of tea. You started brewing it in September, and by January it was about just strong enough to keep the chill off. And so there was Robert chipping away, the chips of ice flying through the air, and he went down 1 foot, 2 feet, 3 feet, 4 feet, 5 feet, and he disappeared from view. But Robert was a stubborn one, and so he kept chopping away. The chips kept on flying until some time ago there was a sound from the bottom of the hole. And just excuse me, I will take care of that annoyance. Oh, good Lord. Kept on forgetting, you know. Now, where were we? Oh, yes, the bottom of a hole. And a voice from a hollow hole came up. Hey, Norman, I'm sorry, but I don't think we're going to catch any fish today. The lake is frozen solid. And I looked over the edge, and there was Robert standing at the bottom, 15 feet straight down. And I said, what do you mean we're not going to get any fish? You missed one on the way down. What do you mean? He says, well, look at those fish lips. Halfway down, sticking out of the ice. And sure enough, there was a pair of fish lips sticking out of the ice. And where there's fish lips, of course, behind it, there's a fish. And we chopped it out, and it was a nice 2-pound bass. But what's more, behind it, there was another fish. In fact, there was 2 of them. We chopped those out. And those behind that, more and more. And we chopped in, and we found the mother lode. A huge ball of frozen fish. They had all huddled together to try and keep warm as the lake froze solid. And poor things, they didn't know they were cold-blooded, and so it didn't do much good, but did us a lot of good, because we opened a fish mine. We went down to Giesbrecht's store in Petawawa, and we made it known for a little bit of money we could let them catch all the fish they needed without the trouble of, you know, sitting in the cold and freezing their various and sundries off. And so we took them down to Mud Lake. The money exchanged hands. The fish came out of the lake. And soon we figured we had made a bit of money, and we had made enough. And half the fish were gone. And we decided to close down the fish mine because, well, if you take them all, what is there for the future, right? And so the snow drifted over, filled it up. The spring finally came, as it always does, and the snow melted and the ice melted and the lake defrosted, and so did the fish, and they just swam off. And, well, that's one last little bit to tell of the Ottawa Valley Fish Mine. We never had another one because, you see, what with this global warming, there'll never be another Ottawa Valley Fish Mine. And so all that is left is this story, and you'll have to be satisfied with that.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Norman. Now we might come back across the Atlantic, but I've just noticed I haven't just noticed. I've been sort of sitting there wondering whether I'm going to spring it on him. Bob, do you have a 5-minute story?
Well, wow.
Do you want me to put Hannah on? Should we poodle back across the Atlantic and then come back? We'll give you 2 minutes to think about it. Or
All right, it might have to be a 1-minute story.
okay. I'll be back to you then.
All right.
Okay. So we'll go Hannah, Bob, Bade. Just so there's some semblance of order in this. But yeah, I can't have, when I've been sitting up with with fish mines in Canada, I can't let someone escape who happens to be in New Mexico sun. And besides, you're on next Sunday, so I want everyone to know about you. So Hannah, I'm coming back. Fortunately, I'm coming back to Stansted because I'm going to the east of the country. I'm going to cross over. I'm going to go to Colchester and then slide down to Chelmsford and and take the South End road, and we're sitting in what we call sweltering heat, and Bob would just probably call midwinter. It's Hannah Brailsford.
Thank you, John. Yes, it is very hot for Southend, as you can see. I'm a little bit glowing. So, a tale for you, a quick tale of a prince. And this prince, he was said to be a prince of Essex. And if you know anything about Essex, then sometimes princes of Essex aren't always the most polite of princes. And this prince was no exception. And he managed to be very unprincely to the wrong woman, to an old crone of Essex. Now, Essex has been full of witches for years and years, and at this time, witches were rife. And so our crone laid a curse upon our most rude prince. Our prince didn't really care. After all, he was an Essex prince. She was an old bag. He didn't care about her curse. What was her curse, I hear you ask? Well, it was that he was to speak but one word a year. Now, he wasn't much for talking, so he didn't really take much heed to it until the day he met his Essex princess. Oh, she was beautiful. But unfortunately, he couldn't tell her so, or if he wanted to, he would have to wait some years. But as luck would have it, our Essex princess, she wasn't really into talking either. And so our prince and princess, they spent many a happy year just looking into each other's eyes and exchanging silent tokens of affection. But after 5 years of this, our prince was desperate to tell his princess that he loved her. And so the day came that he decided he would say, "My darling, I love you." But on that day, he realized he didn't just love her. No, this was the princess he wanted to make his Essex queen. And so he steeled himself for another 4 years, so that he would be able to not only tell her that he loved her, but ask for her hand as well. And so on that 9th year, he took his Essex princess into the most beautiful park, a park where there was an arbour covered in roses. The scent filled the air. And he sat his princess down on the little seat in the arbour. And he went down on one knee, and in a croaky voice, for he had not spoken for over 9 years, he said, "My darling, I love you. Will you marry me?" And she looked into her prince's eyes, and she stood up. And she took his hands and she lifted him to his feet. And she said, What? Oh, ends. An Essex.
Thank you, Hannah. How very Essex of you. Who was the King of Bling down there where they dug up that ancient mound when they were where they camped in Southend to stop the road being built?
He was the Saxon prince. Yes, the Saxon king.
Yeah,
perhaps he was our prince, actually, John. You never know.
Yeah, but because he was found with all this gold stuff, and because it was Essex, the papers dubbed him the King of Bling.
He was the original Essex man.
Yeah, he was. So what we're going to some real heat, not wussy heat. No, this is proper heat. We're going down to New Mexico, and is it 100 degrees there, Bob?
It was 100 degrees yesterday. Yes, it was.
Yeah. So how does that go across the centigrade? It's about 45 or something, isn't it? Yeah.
I was thinking about.
It's low.
Thinking about all the ways that Norm described the cold there in Canada. I could go on with that about the heat here, but I think I'll save that for another time. But yeah, I try and get up into the mountains at least once a week to get away from this unrelenting heat.
Well, let's forget the heat for a moment. Well, maybe not. But have you got a short story for us?
Yeah, it's a real short one. I wasn't expecting.
Well, I know I sprung it on you, but you know.
No, you sprung it on me, but that's fine. So
Kaylee, after all.
As I was listening, I heard a horse. I saw a horse appear in several of the stories. So a story about a horse occurred to me as a quick one that I could tell. There are lots of stories about seekers after truth, and there were 3 of those seekers up high in the mountain fastness, somewhere up in the Himalayas. There were these 3 monks. They'd all taken vows of poverty together and perhaps of silence together. They'd been sitting in meditation for a long, long time. Suddenly, a horse ran by. And about a year passed. And the first monk turned to his companions and said, "Did you see that black horse? Wasn't it beautiful?" And about another 5 years went by. And the second monk turned to the other 2 companions and said, "Oh, no, you didn't see correctly. That wasn't a black horse. That was a brown horse." 10 more years passed. And at the end of those 10 years, the third monk got up out of his lotus position, stood up, stretched his creaky bones, and said, "I'm out of here. Just too much talk." And, I don't tell that to discourage anyone from the next story, by the way.
No. Anyway, you couldn't discourage Baden if you tried. We're coming back, and we're going down to London town. Now, Baden claims that he's just been working 3 nights on the trot and he's hardly awake. So, are you awake enough to tell us a story, Baden?
What? Hey?
Yeah.
Oh.
Put your hand together, Baden Prince.
Yeah.
So this one's for Orla because she's off to the pub, and there's been a couple of drinking stories, and there's been a couple of stories where things come around year after year. And apologies if you've heard this one before, but it's about man walks into a bar, goes up to the landlord, and he says, "I'll have a rum, a whiskey, and a brandy. Doubles." Bartender pours the drinks, and he's looking to see who else is coming in. And the man picks them up and he knocks them down one by one. Rum, whiskey, brandy. "How much do I owe you?" he says. "That'll be 10 quid, says the barman. He pays him, gets to his feet, and he turns and he staggers out of the door a little less steadily than he walked in. Bartender thinks, what's all that? 1 year later, to the day, to the hour, the same man walks into the same bar, goes up to the same bartender, and he says, I'll have a drink. I'll have a rum, a brandy, and a whiskey. Doubles. Bartender sets them up. He knocks them down, one after the other. How much do I owe you, he says. Bartender says, that'll be 15 quid. And before you ask, that's inflation for you. He pays him, off he goes, staggers out the door, a bit unsteady on his feet. Bartender thinks, what's going on? 1 year to the day, to the hour, to the minute later, the same man walks into the same bar, goes up and orders the same round. I'll have a rum, brandy, and a whiskey. And the bartender starts pouring, and he can't help himself. This is human nature. And he says, if it's none of my business, tell me, but what's going on? The man says, oh, well, it's not that mysterious, really, he says. 3 friends, lifelong friends, went to school together, grew up together. We were best men at each other's weddings. We're godfathers to each other's children. And 3 years ago, 2 of them got jobs abroad. Bob got a job in Botswana. Colin went to Canada. But we made a vow that wherever we were, on this day, at this hour, we'd find ourselves in a bar, in a pub, and we'd have a round to celebrate a lifelong friendship. And that way, the friendship will never die. Well, almost brings a tears to your eyes, doesn't it? You know, it's so touching. Bartender actually lets him have one on the house and decides to join him for one himself. Well, this goes on for a few years, well. And actually over time, they become friends almost, you know, as happens. And then one fateful evening, he walks in and he says, I'll have a rum and a brandy. And there's this dramatic pause. And the bartender goes, oh my God, oh, mate, sorry, what happened? Was it Bob? Was it Colin? I'm so sorry, you know, my condolences. The guy goes, what are you talking about? You know, only talked to Bob this morning, they're fine. The bartender goes, so I don't understand. He says, it's me. Today he told me my liver's shot and I gotta quit drinking. Cheers.
Good, baby.
Oh, right.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Now I think I'm going to do a 5-minute one.
Hey.
If the assembled company allows me. Now, yesterday, it was in 1999 was the last eclipse of the sun of the millennium, and so and I did this story. I rarely do it, so you know I've probably done it about 6 times since then. But it's from the very beginning of time, and all the animals have got their beautiful fur coat, and the birds have got their beautiful plumage, and the celestial spinner has spun that fine black thread. And the cosmic weavers have woven that thread into the cloak of night. And there was day and there was night. And everyone was ecstatic. I mean, you know, especially the birds. you know, especially the bloke birds, you know, because with birds, you know, it's we've got the plumage, and but you know, and the lion, I mean, just that mane, you know. I know lionesses run the show, but you know, if you've got a mane that size, you can strong. And but the only one that was unhappy was the raven. The raven was the most beautiful coloured bird in the whole animal and bird kingdom. But the problem was it was really shy. Raven was shy, and everyone looked at it. Everyone's looking at me. I've got this beautiful plumage. So one night he went up and he took the cloak of night and he wrapped it round himself and he flew off into the mountain. Well, at first everyone was kind of happy. You know, when summer comes in Britain, we're all happy. After 2 days of heat, everyone's going, "This winter is far too hot. It's far too hot," and so it was a bit like that, you know. And it got hotter and hotter. There was no night. It was just the sun hanging there in the sky all the time. So the animals had a little council. And they said, someone's got to go up. Someone's got to fly up and talk to the cosmic weavers and get them to weave a new cloak of night. Well, the sparrow tried, you know. Well, if you watch a sparrow fly, they get to about the top of a tree and then, you know, like too much trouble. And they all tried, but eventually the skylark the skylark just hovered there, you know, just. So the swallow went higher and higher and higher and reached the cosmic weavers. And he said, "Look, you know, we're having a bit of bother down there. Could you weave us a new cloak of night?" They said, "We'd love to." You know. They were there. They were spinning and they were weaving stars onto a sort of white background. We need black thread. Go to the celestial spinners and get us some black thread. So it flew off, and so I said, I'm terribly sorry to disturb you, but could I have some black thread to take to the cosmic weavers so we can get a new cloak of night? And I said, love to, really love to. But, well, we used up all the darkness to spin that black thread to make the last cloak of it. Unless you can get us some darkness, we can't do anything about it. So Swallow ran back. They talked it over and they said, well, if we could only roll the moon in front of the sun, push that moon in front of the sun for a little minute, it'd give her just enough to darkness. Well, the eagle said, well, I can, you know, I'm probably strong enough and I can get up there, but, you know, I've got this kind of pointed beak thing, which I, you know, use for nefarious purposes. And I'll probably burst the moon. Someone could stand on my back and the lion said, I'll do that. And the guy, and the eagle said, you've got to be joking, mate. You know, I'll fly up there and we'll do the job. And I'll come back and we'll be about a foot off the ground and you'll eat me and just jump. And the elephant said, look, I can do it. You know, I'm safe. He said, you're an elephant. You think I can fly up there with an elephant on my back? So in the end, this little voice of the mouse went, I'll do it. Whoa. The eagle trusted the mouse. The mouse got on the eagle's head. They flew up. When they got to the moon, the mouse pushed up its little front legs. Pushed and pushed, but the moon wouldn't budge. So they you know, it's like when you sort of trying to kick a door in or so. Oh no, you probably don't do that sort of thing. But you'd probably need a few goes. So they'd fly as hard as they could at the moon. Boom, 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 and eventually it started rolling forward, like getting a car out of the mud. And that rolled in front of the sun, just enough to make enough dark for the celestial spinner, to make enough black thread for the cosmic weave to weave a new cloak of night. And of course they flew back. And there was, in the way of things, there was great feasting, I mean, there probably will be at the end of COVID or something. There's going to be massive feasting everywhere, and and I want that bottle of rum, Mike Baden. Okay, but ever since then, just occasionally, the mouse gets back on the head of the eagle, and they fly up, and they push the moon over the sun, so there's always just a little darkness in case of an emergency. Whoa. We seem to have gone around. What's the time, Bianca? I can't see the time.
It's almost 7.
It's almost 7. Yeah, well, that's okay. It's okay. We're fine. Well, thank you, Francis, Sarah, Irie, everybody. Yeah, Norman, Baden. There's people. Oh, Bob, and and anyone I might have forgotten.
Hannah.
There
you forgot
go.
Hannah. Oh, Hannah. She's right in the middle. You see, there's Hannah. Hannah. I'm going to be in trouble. And thank you to the audience. So Stephanie, stop yawning, just because I'm talking.
And Janet.
So brilliant. Thank you, Bianca, for being our host. And we've got some amazing stuff coming up. We've got Yusufu Jallo on next Saturday live. Brilliant storyteller from Sierra Leone, and on Sunday, the what's his name? Bob Kengas from New Mexico, live and direct from New Mexico on Sunday, and next Monday, the next Connecting the World by Story. We thought, as there not going to be many carnivals this year, Baden and I will put a carnival night together. So we're negotiating for a Calypsonian.
No, I will not be wearing a samba costume.
Yeah, I've got some steel pan. We've got some poetry. We've got. We don't know what we got. We're just sort of going around collecting people at the moment. We got enough for a pro. We know we got enough for a pro.
Dance.
Pardon?
You should dance.
I should dance. No.
I've seen John dance.
No. And we're also going to do a little bit of the history of carnival, and so forth, and then where it started in, we're just going to have a good time.
We got a couple of guests, and if they
got a couple of guests, haven't we? We've got a couple of guests.
Yeah, that should be fun.
Yeah, Baden's been out kidnapping people, and so we're looking for a good time next Monday. That might go on for a while, Bianca, if everything works.
It's fine. I'm here for you, so.
So, if anyone wants a natter to anyone while we're all here, let's retire to the bar and have a natter. Unmute yourselves. That's a great dog you've got there, Sarah.
Yeah, he wants to go for a walk.
Okay, we'll let you go. Bye, Sarah.
Bye, Sarah.
Bye, doggy.
Okay, bye, Sarah. Bye, doggy. Nice to see you, Hannah.
Nice to see you, Baden. I hope you are going to be dancing on Monday. Yeah. I'm only tuning in if you're dancing.
I'll be dancing inside.
Not good enough. We want to see those feet move.
And you, Baden, you look so handsome in all those different colored suits that you had on with matching shoes. I just was so impressed. I thought
That's true. That was
oh
Trudy
my.
talking down there.
Yeah,
There-
yes,
You
Trudy.
can't
yeah.
see Trudy.
Well, good, because I'm still in my nightgown, even though it's afternoon, and but I
that's
have
traditional.
thoroughly enjoyed this. Well, yeah,
that's traditional East Texas wear, isn't it?
well, for me it is, because clothes are just too much in the heat, and it's hot here. It's not as hot as it is in New Mexico on the down, but my sister lives on top of a mountain and she says it's cool there all the time. And but since we have COVID, we can't travel from state to state right now. So anyhow, I mean, neither of us actually have it. We just are not going to get it if we can help it. So
Good move. Good move.
yeah, I thought
Yeah.
so
Good
too.
plan.
Yeah.
And I really enjoyed everybody's story so much. It was so much fun.
Yeah, lovely
Thank
evening.
you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Amen.
Thank you all.
Yeah. Amen to that. And well,
So-
thank you all.
Thank
you,
you,
John.
everyone.
See
Okay,
you
nice
next
one.
week, guys.
Bob.
See you again soon.
See you down the road, as they say.
All right.
Cozy on. Okay.
Bye
Stay safe,
bye.
everybody.
Everyone.
Stay safe.
Bye.
Bye bye.